This video is on power and some basic ideas regarding power and its various forms. So let's begin with some basic and fundamental definitions. The definition of power is the ability to influence the behavior of others to get the outcome that you want. Now, there are two primary types of power: soft power and hard power. Soft power is influence through trust and relationships, whereas hard power is influence through the use of force or payment or coercion of some kind. Now, an organization or a country's soft power rests primarily on three things: its culture, its values, and its policies. And these things can create a perception by others that it has a legitimate moral authority. Now, from a personal standpoint, soft power usually rests on one's values or reputation or overall ethics. Soft power is usually a long game in the sense that it takes time to create, build, and sustain not only the reputation needed to successfully wield soft power, but to build up the relationships as well. On the other hand, hard power is usually used when time is limited and action needs to be taken immediately, and you know that you're not going to have the time and the ability to wield any kind of soft power with the other party. Hard power is usually used well in crisis situations where there's a lot of chaos. Now, underneath soft and hard power, there are 5 secondary types of power. The first one is coercive power. This type of power utilizes coercion and is conveyed through the fear of losing something, like one's job, being demoted, having something taken away. So this power is gained by threatening others. The second one is reward power. Now, this is gained by one's ability to give something, such as money or raises, bonuses, etc. The third type of power is known as legitimate power, also referred to as position power. And this is where a leader holds a position, such as in upper management, that gives them a certain type of influence over a given situation. The fourth type is known as expert power, and this is power gained through one's experience, skill, or knowledge of something. And then finally, there is referent power, and this is power gained from trust, respect, or an individual's overall reputation and charisma. Now, I want to pose this question to you: how and when does power become unethical? Now, I personally find this interesting to look at from a biological perspective initially. Dominance hierarchy is a term that's used by biologists very regularly because most social animals, even animals that aren't social, in fact, it's really any animals that have to compete for occupation of a specific territorial space. But they tend to organize themselves into fairly predictable hierarchies, and it really is a biological universal. The neural biological systems that we have evolved, or that have evolved to deal with dominance hierarchy placement, are at least 1/3 of a billion years old. So to put that in perspective, there weren't trees 1/3 of a billion years ago. So this is something that's very innate, and it's been built up in our biological systems over a long period of time. Frans de Waal, who's a Dutch primatologist, wrote a series of excellent books on the emergence of morality in chimpanzees. And one of the things that de Waal noted was that in chimpanzee hierarchies, the brutal males had the ability to rise to the top of the hierarchy, but they tended to have very short-lived empires and to meet very violent ends and violent deaths. So de Waal's conclusion was that in order for a chimpanzee hierarchy to be sustainable across time, then the top chimp had to be quite pro-social. So it had to, first of all, engage in some very sufficient reciprocal behavior. So he had allies among other males, right? Because otherwise, if you're top chimp and you're a strongman type and you've established your dominance merely as a matter of intimidation, strength, then if you have one off day and you're feeling sick or you're slightly weaker, then your opponents can tear you to pieces, which is exactly what the chimps do, because they're quite brutal, actually. And there's what's interesting is there's no real evidence that chimpanzees have any kind of internal regulation of the violence that they'll use to shift dominance hierarchy positions. And so you end up castrated, for example, by your opponents, which is something that DeWaal noted in his research. So he found that the stable chimp troops had males at the helm who had friendships, because chimps actually have social friendships, really, that they can stretch across many years, decades even, and that they track them very well, and their behavior was very reciprocal to the other chimps. They tended to treat the females well by chimp standards. They also tended to pay a fair amount of attention to the infants, which is an unbelievably important finding, because it indicates at a level that's below the human, let's say, that there's an ethic associated with leadership that isn't a mere consequence of raw power. And so if we look at and we ask the question, how and when does power become unethical? You have to ask yourself, well, which style of power do you appreciate the most? Which one resonates with you most? And which one helps keep you the most productive and efficient over a sustainable period of time?